Now, whenever we come to think about reaching out to those, let's say, pacifist Muslims, how do we pursue? Where do we start in reaching out to Muslims? When you endeavor to share Christ with a Muslim, you are stepping into a battle. For Muslims, the cross is a stumbling block. It is for this reason we must be prepared not only intellectually, but also in spirit and attitude before taking on this challenge. Therefore, there are three simple prerequisites that are of paramount importance. They are simple yet of paramount importance before moving on to the theological issues involved. Three prerequisites, three areas that are simple yet of paramount importance, and I wanted to emphasize that before getting into any kind of theological argument, theological issue, or thinking about reaching out to Muslims. And I'm going to tell you why. The first one is you must be filled with the Holy Spirit. One of the most critical element in witnessing to Muslim is that for one to be spirit-filled. Jesus said in John 15:26, whenever the Helper comes, Spirit who proceed from the Father, whom I will send to you from the Father, he will bear witness of me. So success in witnessing is sharing the gospel, sharing the good news in the power of the Holy Spirit and leaving the results to God. When you witness to a Muslim, you are in intense spiritual battle. If you are not filled with the Spirit of the Lord, you will not be able to continue. I've been in sessions with Muslims where I felt I was going to have a heart attack. One night, I sat with a gentleman from Pakistan. We were at a Christian's friend. Discussion began to become really heated. The conversation kept on going back and forth, back and forth. I felt I was going to explode. And at some point, I felt I was so frustrated to the point I said, why can't he get it? And I literally felt I was going to punch him in the face. But I said to myself, this is where I have to continue in the Spirit. Satan would love for us to believe that Muslims are unreachable. They're very hard to reach out to them. They're very hard to become Christians or the children of the kingdom. But this is where we have to continue. And one of the most important factors of being able to continue is to be filled with the Spirit of the Lord. Now, the second prerequisite, I would say that you must be in prayer at all times. You will have to pray to God that He will get the Muslim into the kingdom. Because without that, you should not even begin. When you go out witnessing, you should not go straight onto the field for sharing. Back home, when I used to go with some friends to witness to Muslims, we always go first in prayer. Even when we're pressed for time, we still go first in prayer. There's no other way. Muslims are one of the most difficult people in the world to evangelize. Sometimes, at some point, you will feel so much frustrated, so much defeated, to the point that you want to quit. But this is where you have to begin again and pray. The third prerequisite is you must have love. The mass media in the West has done a great harm in stereotyping Muslims, in damaging and, in a sense, affecting outreach to the Muslim people. When people here in the West think about Muslims, there is no compassion, no concern for the need of Christ, no understanding that they are lost. Apparently, or it seems, there only has to be the pervasive stereotype of the Muslim terrorist. But are we to say that all Muslims are terrorists? And even if they were, would that be enough reason to hate them? I believe we need Christian love to combat these misconceptions and restore our burden for those who are lost without Christ. The second reason we need love is the only thing that will keep us from losing heart in our outreach to Muslims, because at some point, or most of the time, Muslims reject Christ. Whenever you experience that, you will feel that you don't want to see that person again and you don't want to pray for him. Actually, I've been in a situation where I felt I don't want to see that person again, but I was wrong. And we should restore our love for Muslims. Many former Muslims say that it was a Christian love for them that turned their attention to the Christian faith. And I believe love is God's strongest instrument, strongest tool for saving Muslims. Love is the only thing that Muslims cannot argue with. You know, we can bring up somehow the conflict between the Sunni and the Shia, for instance, in Iraq. And they will bring, for instance, the conflict in Ireland between the Protestant and the Catholic. You argue for the Bible, they will argue for the Quran. You bring up Jesus, they will bring up Muhammad. Bring any argument you have for the Muslims, and they have all an answer for all of these arguments. However, you come up with unconditional love and acceptance, and Muslims can have nothing to argue about but to love you back. Let me share this story with you. I've been on a mission trip to Uskudar, and that's in Istanbul in Turkey. And some missionaries, friends, wanted to show their love, their appreciation, like for one of the Syrian refugees who were living in a camp in Istanbul. And we decided to buy for them sandals because they're running, all day long in the heat of the day, to the point where, they will hurt their legs and it will become infected. So we decide to bring sandals for them. But we said before we are going to give them the sandal, we decide to wash their feet and to put medication on the legs. And while we're doing so, we will pray for them. And actually, that's what we did. After a while, some weeks from that day, a teacher came to this camp and she asked the students, who is the best Muslim in the world? And one of the girls stood up and she raised up her hand and she said, the infidels. Do you know what the infidels mean? It means those who are, for instance, Christians considered to be infidel. Anybody outside the Muslim world considered to be infidel. So in a sense, she said the infidel, and after the teacher recovered from a cardiac arrest, and she said, why? And she said, because the ISIS killed my father, but the Christians, the infidels, washed my feet. Again, love wins. None of these things I'm sharing with you is new to you, but it must be emphasized before getting into the nitty-gritty of explaining the gospel to Muslims. These three things: be filled with the Holy Spirit, be in prayer at all time, and having love, is more important than any knowledge that you can have about Islam or the Quran. Many Christians have led Muslims to Christ without any knowledge of Islam, and I believe the more we know, the better, like what we're doing today. But I doubt if any Christian can bring a Muslim to Christ if he's not filled with the Holy Spirit, if he's not in prayer, and if he does not have love. Because with these three things, the gospel will become evident to them. So I wanted to share these three prerequisites before. If we don't grasp these things, I would say we should not even go further with reaching out to Muslims. Very simple prerequisites, but it is of paramount importance whenever we want to engage Islam or Muslim people, whether locally or abroad.